Just for a week, my sister begged through tears. When 5-year-old Scarlett arrived with a suitcase packed for months and fear in her eyes, I knew something was wrong. When I found adoption papers with my forged signature months before they'd even called, I knew something was evil. They didn't abandon their daughter, they tried to sell her. And I was supposed to be the grateful middleman who wouldn't ask questions. They picked the wrong woman. Because while they saw a lonely aunt who'd take what she could get, what they actually found was a mother who would go to war for her child. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The phone rang at 11:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, jolting me awake from the couch where I'd fallen asleep watching late-night reruns. My sister Vivian's name flashed on the screen, and something cold settled in my stomach. She never called this late unless something was wrong. "Emmy?" Her voice came through broken and shaky, like she'd been crying for hours. "I'm so sorry to call this late, but I need help. I really need help." I sat up, pushing my hair back from my face. "Viv, what's wrong? Are you okay? Is Scarlett okay?" "We're fine. We're both fine, but..." She took a shuddering breath. "My marriage is falling apart, Emmy. Dashiell and we've been fighting constantly. Scarlett hears everything, and I can see it's affecting her. She's so quiet now, so scared all the time." My heart ached for my little niece. At 5 years old, Scarlett was this tiny, delicate thing with huge blue eyes that always seemed too serious for her age. The few times I'd seen her recently, she'd barely spoken above a whisper. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, already knowing where this was heading. "We found this couple's therapist, Dr. Williams, who does intensive retreats. A week-long program in the mountains where we can work on our issues without distractions. But we can't bring Scarlett." Vivian's voice picked up speed, the way it always did when she was trying to sell me on something. "I know it's a huge favor, and I hate asking, but could she stay with you? Just for 1 week? I promise, Emmy. Just 7 days, and we'll come get her." I looked around my pristine apartment with its white furniture and breakable decorations. I'd never had a child stay overnight, let alone for a week. But the desperation in my sister's voice was real, and I'd always felt protective of Scarlett. "Of course," I heard myself saying. "When do you need to leave?" "Tomorrow evening. Our flight leaves at 8, so we drop her off around 5 if that's okay." Everything about this felt rushed, but marriages were complicated things. Maybe they really did need this intensive therapy. Maybe saving their relationship was worth disrupting my carefully ordered life for a week. "That's fine. I'll pick up some groceries and child-proof a few things." "You're amazing, Emmy. I owe you big time. And don't worry about child-proofing anything major. Scarlett's very well behaved. She won't touch anything she's not supposed to." Something about that statement bothered me, but before I could analyze why, Vivian was already saying goodbye and hanging up. I stared at my phone for a long moment before getting up to make a mental list of everything I need for a 5-year-old. The next evening, I waited by my apartment door with nervous energy. I'd spent the day shopping for kid-friendly food, picking up coloring books and crayons, and moving anything obviously dangerous out of reach. My spare bedroom was ready with fresh sheets, and I'd even bought a small nightlight shaped like a butterfly. When the knock came, I opened the door to find Dashiell holding a small pink suitcase while Vivian crouched next to Scarlett, speaking to her in hushed tones. My niece clutched a worn teddy bear to her chest, a gray elephant with one ear more chewed than the other. "Hey there, sweetheart," I said, kneeling down to Scarlett's level. She looked up at me with those enormous blue eyes, and I noticed dark circles underneath them. "Are you excited for our sleepover week?" Scarlett glanced at her mother, then back at me, and nodded once. She didn't smile. "She's been looking forward to it," Vivian said, but her voice had that bright, fake quality she used when she was lying. She stood up quickly, brushing invisible lint off her expensive jacket. "We really need to get going. Traffic to the airport, you know how it is." "Wait," I said, reaching for the suitcase Dashiell was holding. "Don't you want to come in for a minute? Help her get settled." "No time," Dashiell said brusquely. He was a tall man with sharp features and an expensive watch that he checked constantly. "The car's running downstairs." Vivian bent down and gave Scarlet a quick hug. Be good for Aunt Emmy, okay? I'll call you every day. When are you coming back? Scarlet asked in a voice so small I almost didn't hear it. 1 week, baby. 7 days. I promise. Vivian kissed the top of Scarlet's head, and then she and Dashiell were walking quickly toward the elevator, leaving me standing in my doorway with a little girl who looked like she might cry. I closed the door softly and set the suitcase down. Well, Miss Scarlet, should we see what fun things we can do this week? She looked up at me with those serious eyes. Are you going to send me back when I'm bad? The question hit me like a physical blow. Sweetheart, you're not bad. And even if you make mistakes, which all kids do, I'm not going to send you anywhere. Your mom and dad will come pick you up in exactly 1 week. She nodded but didn't look convinced. I decided to start with the basics. Are you hungry? I got some chicken nuggets, the dinosaur-shaped ones. For the first time, her face brightened just a little. Dinosaur nuggets? With mac and cheese. And I have chocolate milk too. She followed me to the kitchen, still clutching her elephant. As I heated up dinner, I watched her from the corner of my eye. She sat perfectly still in the chair, hands folded in her lap, waiting for permission for everything. You can touch things, you know, I said gently. This is your space too while you're here. She nodded but didn't move. When I placed the plate in front of her, she looked up at me expectantly. Go ahead, eat up. Only then did she pick up her fork. She ate slowly, methodically, like she was afraid the food might disappear. It reminded me of a stray cat I'd once fed, grateful but ready to run. After dinner, I showed her to the spare bedroom. This is your room while you're here. I put some coloring books on the dresser, and that nightlight is for you too. Scarlet set her elephant on the bed and looked around the room like she'd never seen anything so nice. This is all for me? All for you. Should we unpack your suitcase? She nodded, and I lifted the small pink case onto the bed. When I unzipped it, my breath caught. The suitcase was packed like someone was going away for months, not a week. There were clothes for different seasons, heavy sweaters, summer dresses, winter pajamas. At the bottom, I found things that made my stomach twist. Her birth certificate, her social security card, medical records, and even her favorite books from home. Scarlet, I said carefully, did you help Mommy pack this? She shook her head. Mommy packed it while I was sleeping. She said I needed everything, because you live far away. I lived 20 minutes from their house. Something was very wrong here, but I didn't want to scare Scarlet. Instead, I helped her put her clothes in the dresser and set up her books on the nightstand. That night, after I'd read her 3 stories and tucked her in with her elephant, I tried calling Vivian. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried Dashiell's number with the same result. Maybe they were already on the plane. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my living room, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that had been growing all evening. The way they'd rushed off, the overpacked suitcase, Scarlet's obvious anxiety. None of it added up to a simple week-long therapy retreat. Around midnight, I heard a small sound from the spare bedroom. I found Scarlet sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face. What's wrong, sweetheart? I had a bad dream about the screaming room, she whispered. The screaming room? She nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. It's where I have to stay when Mommy and Daddy fight. They lock the door, so I can't come out, but I can still hear them yelling. Sometimes they throw things and they break. My heart broke for this little girl. I sat on the edge of her bed and smoothed her hair back from her face. There's no screaming room here, okay? And if you have bad dreams, you can always come find me. I'm right down the hall. Promise you won't lock me in? I promise. Do you want me to stay until you fall back asleep? She nodded, scooting over to make room for me on the small bed. I lay down next to her, and she curled up against my side like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to hold her. Within minutes, she was breathing deeply, finally peaceful. I stayed there for another hour, watching her sleep and wondering what kind of home life could make a 5-year-old so scared and grateful for basic kindness. 3 days passed with no word from Vivian or Dashiell. I'd left multiple voicemails, sent texts, Even tried messaging Vivian on social media. Nothing. Their profiles showed no recent activity, no photos from their supposed therapy retreat in the mountains. Meanwhile, Scarlet was slowly starting to come out of her shell. She still asked permission for everything and flinched when I moved too quickly, but she'd started talking more. Mostly questions about whether I meant what I said, whether I was going to change my mind about letting her stay. "Aunt Emmy," she said on Thursday morning as we ate breakfast, "when Mommy comes back, will you tell her I was good?" "You've been very good, sweetheart. But you know what? Even if you hadn't been perfect, I'd still want you here." She looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "But Mommy says when I'm bad, I make everything worse. That's why Daddy gets mad." I set down my coffee cup carefully, trying to keep my voice calm. "Scarlet, you're 5 years old. 5-year-olds can't make grown-ups fight. That's not how it works." She considered this, spooning cereal into her mouth with the careful precision she applied to everything. "Then why does Daddy say it's my fault when they scream?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Finally, Vivian's name on the screen. I stepped into the living room to take the call. "Viv, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. How's the retreat going?" "Oh, Emmy, it's been so intensive. We're not allowed phones during the day, and by evening we're so emotionally drained." Her voice sounded different somehow, relaxed in a way that didn't match someone going through intensive couples therapy. "How much longer do you think you'll need?" "Scarlett's doing fine, but she misses you." There was a pause. "Actually, the therapist thinks we might need to extend the program. Maybe another week or 2. Is that okay?" "Another week or 2. Viv, that's not what we agreed on. I have work, I have obligations. I know, and I'm so grateful. But this is really working for us, Emmy. Dr. Williams says we're making breakthrough progress." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. She sounded like she was lying on a beach somewhere, not wrestling with deep marital issues. "What's the name of this place again? Maybe I could look it up online, see if they have family programs. I have to go, Group session starting. Give Scarlet my love, okay? Tell her Mommy's working hard to come home to her." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, that cold feeling in my stomach getting worse. 2 weeks had just become 3 or 4, and I had no way to verify anything she'd told me. That afternoon, I decided to drive to Vivian and Dashiell's house. Maybe I could get some answers from their neighbors, or at least pick up more of Scarlett's things if this was going to be a longer stay. "Where are we going?" Scarlett asked from her car seat as I pulled into their driveway. "I thought we'd pick up some more of your toys. Is that okay?" She looked at the house with an expression I couldn't read. Not excitement to see her home, but something closer to fear. "Are they back?"
"No, sweetheart.
It's just us." I used my spare key to let us in, and immediately something felt wrong. The house was too quiet, too clean. In the living room, I noticed things were missing. The expensive coffee table that Vivian had bragged about, some artwork from the walls. The kitchen had been cleared of all the small appliances that usually cluttered the counters. "Scarlet, why don't you go pick out some toys from your room?" She nodded and headed upstairs while I continued exploring. In the master bedroom, the closet was half empty. Vivian's jewelry box was gone, along with most of Dashiell's suits. This wasn't packing for a week-long retreat. This was packing to move out permanently. In the kitchen, I found a stack of mail that had been collecting. Bills, mostly, but several were marked "Final Notice" in red letters. An eviction notice dated 2 weeks ago. A bankruptcy filing document. And underneath it all, something that made my blood run cold, a credit card statement in Scarlett's name. A 5-year-old with a credit card. I scanned the charges with growing horror. Cash advances, expensive purchases, all adding up to thousands of dollars in debt. Someone had been using my niece's identity for fraud. "Aunt Emmy?" Scarlett's voice came from upstairs, small and scared. I found her in her bedroom, which was the only room in the house that looked normal. Her bed was made with the pink comforter she'd had since she was 3, her bookshelf still full of picture books, her toy chest overflowing with stuffed animals. "Why didn't they take my things?" she asked. The question broke my heart. Even at 5, She understood that her parents had taken everything valuable and left her behind like an afterthought. I don't know, sweetheart, but we can take whatever you want back to my house. She picked out a few favorite toys and another stuffed animal, but her movements were mechanical. As we were leaving, she stopped at the front door and looked back. I don't think they're coming back, she said quietly. I knelt down next to her. What makes you say that? Mommy did this before. When we lived in the other house with the blue kitchen. One day I came home from daycare and all our stuff was gone. Mommy said we were going on an adventure, but we never went back. My hands were shaking as I buckled her into her car seat. How many times had Vivian done this? How many times had she uprooted this little girl's life without explanation? That evening, after Scarlett was asleep, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Goldstein. She was in her 70s and knew everything that happened on the block. Oh, honey, she said when I asked about Vivian and Dashiell. I haven't seen hide nor hair of them in weeks. Their lawn service stopped coming. Mail's been piling up. I was starting to wonder if something had happened. Did you see them packing up a moving truck or anything? Now that you mention it, there was a van there one night about 2 weeks ago. Thought it was odd they were loading it so late, but you know how young people are these days. 2 weeks ago. They'd been planning this for at least that long, maybe longer. The phone call, the desperate plea for help, it had all been an act. They'd already packed up their life and decided to dump Scarlet on me. I poured myself another glass of wine and sat in my kitchen, trying to process what I discovered. My sister had abandoned her daughter. Not temporarily, not as part of some therapy program, but permanently. She'd committed identity theft using her own child's information, fled whatever debts they'd accumulated, and left me to pick up the pieces. The worst part was Scarlet. That beautiful, damaged little girl who'd spent her whole life being told she was the problem, that her existence made everything worse. Now she was sleeping peacefully in my spare room, probably the most stable home she'd ever known, and she didn't even know her parents were never coming back. I had no legal rights to her. No paperwork, no custody agreement, nothing. If anyone from social services found out about the situation, they could take her away and put her in foster care while they tried to track down Vivian and Dashiell. But looking at the bankruptcy papers and eviction notice, I was starting to wonder if my sister and her husband were even still in the country. And if they were gone for good, what was I supposed to do with a 5-year-old who'd been thrown away like garbage? The next morning, I called in sick to work and made an appointment with a family lawyer. Sarah Manning had handled my will a few years back, and I hoped she could give me some guidance on this impossible situation. This is complicated, she said after I'd explained everything. Without any legal documentation giving you guardianship, you're in a precarious position. Technically, what your sister did constitutes child abandonment, which is a felony in most states. But what about Scarlet? What happens to her if I report this? She'd likely be placed in emergency foster care while the authorities try to locate her parents. Given what you've told me about their financial situation and the identity theft, that could take months or even years. I thought about Scarlett's face when she talked about the screaming room, the way she asked permission to eat food I'd put in front of her. There has to be another option. There might be. If you're willing to pursue legal guardianship or adoption, we could start those proceedings while also filing abandonment charges. It would be a long process, but it might give you the legal standing to keep her while everything gets sorted out. How long are we talking? Could be anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on whether her parents contest it and whether the court system can even find them to serve papers. 2 years. 2 years of legal limbo with a little girl who'd already been through too much uncertainty. But what was the alternative? Let her disappear into the foster system? Let me think about it, I said. That afternoon, I took Scarlett to the park near my apartment. She played on the swings while I watched, noting how she looked over at me every few minutes like she needed to make sure I was still there. Other kids ran around screaming and laughing, but Scarlett played quietly, carefully, like she was afraid to take up too much space. "Aunt Emmy," she said when she finally came over to sit next to me on the bench, "are my mommy and daddy ever coming back?" I looked into those serious blue eyes and knew I couldn't lie to her anymore. She was smarter than anyone gave her credit for, and she deserved some version of the truth. "I don't know, sweetheart. I haven't been able to reach them for several days now. She nodded like she'd expected this answer. When they don't come back, will you keep me? The question was asked so matter-of-factly, like she was asking about the weather. But I could see the hope and fear warring in her expression. Do you want me to keep you? Yes, she said immediately. You don't scream at me or lock me in rooms. And you read me stories and make dinosaur nuggets. I like it here. I pulled her onto my lap and hugged her tight. Then I'll keep you, okay? No matter what happens, I'll make sure you're safe. She relaxed against me, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like maybe I could handle whatever came next. 6 weeks had passed since Vivian's last phone call. 6 weeks of Scarlett slowly blossoming into a more confident, happy child. She still had moments of anxiety, still sometimes asked if she was being good enough, but she'd started laughing at cartoons and requesting bedtime stories about princesses instead of just sitting quietly wherever I placed her. I'd been working with Sarah Manning to start the legal process of gaining guardianship, though we hadn't filed anything official yet. The identity theft charges were more complicated. Detective Rosalind Park had gotten involved and was building a case, but tracking down Vivian and Dashiell was proving difficult. That Thursday morning, Scarlett needed her birth certificate for school enrollment. I'd been putting off registering her for kindergarten because I wasn't sure what my legal standing was, but Sarah had assured me that as her current caregiver, I could at least get the process started. It's in my suitcase, Scarlett said, pointing to the pink case that had been sitting in her closet since that first night. I'd unpacked her clothes weeks ago, but I'd never really examined the bottom compartment. Now, looking for official documents, I felt around the edges and discovered something I'd missed before, a hidden zippered section. Inside were papers. Lots of papers. And the first one I pulled out made my blood turn to ice. Adoption papers. Official-looking documents with legal letterhead dated 3 months ago. Papers that stated I, Amelia Jane Hartwell, was voluntarily accepting full legal custody and adoption rights for Scarlett May Cross. Papers with my signature, except I'd never signed them. My hands shook as I flipped through the documents. They were incredibly detailed and professional-looking. Notarized signatures, official seals, even a court filing number. Someone had put serious time and money into creating these fake documents. But there was more. A life insurance policy naming me as Scarlett's guardian and beneficiary. Bank account information for an education fund that supposedly I'd set up. Even a will, again, supposedly mine, that named Scarlett as my primary heir. Aunt Emmy? Scarlett appeared in the doorway, clutching her elephant. Did you find my birth certificate? I quickly shuffled the adoption papers under the other documents and found her birth certificate, but my mind was reeling. This wasn't just abandonment. This was an elaborate, premeditated fraud. Someone had spent months creating a paper trail that made it look like I'd legally adopted Scarlett before she'd ever been left with me. Here it is, sweetheart. Why don't you go watch some cartoons while I make a phone call? She skipped off happily, and I immediately called Sarah Manning. Sarah, I found something. I need you to see these documents right away. What kind of documents? Adoption papers. Forged adoption papers with my signature on them, dated months before Vivian ever called me. There was silence on the other end of the line. Amelia, I need you to not touch those papers anymore. Don't show them to anyone else. Can you bring them to my office this afternoon? What does this mean? It means this situation is much more serious than we thought. And it means someone's been planning this for a very long time. That afternoon, while Scarlett was at a playdate with a neighbor's daughter, I met with Sarah. She spread the forged documents across her conference table with a grim expression. These are sophisticated, she said. Professional-grade forgeries. The notary stamps, the court seals, someone paid good money for these. But why? What's the point of making it look like I adopted her before they even left her with me? Sarah picked up one of the documents, the life insurance policy. Look at the beneficiary information. If something happened to Scarlett while she was in your care, you'd receive a substantial payout. But more importantly, these documents would give anyone who had them the legal right to make decisions about her welfare. I don't understand. Amelia, I think your sister was planning to sell these papers. With documents like this, someone could take Scarlet and have legal proof that they had custody rights. To any casual observer, a school, a doctor, even some government officials, it would look like you'd legally transferred your parental rights to them. The room started spinning. You're saying they were going to sell her? I'm saying it's a possibility. We need to investigate. I'm calling Detective Park right now. An hour later, Detective Park sat across from us, examining the documents with a magnifying glass. She was a tall black woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that made me feel slightly better about this nightmare situation. These are good, she said finally. Really good. The kind of forgeries we usually see in organized crime cases.
She looked up at me.
Miss Hartwell, I need you to understand that this goes way beyond simple child abandonment. If my suspicions are correct, your sister and her husband are involved in something much bigger. What kind of something? Human trafficking. Specifically, the illegal adoption market. There are people who will pay enormous amounts of money for healthy children, no questions asked. Documents like these make the transactions look legitimate. I felt sick. But they're her parents. Why would they sell their own child? Because she's not his child, Detective Park said gently. We ran a paternity test based on some evidence we found at their house. Dashiell Cross isn't Scarlett's biological father. She was leverage, not family. The pieces started falling into place with horrible clarity. Scarlett's constant fear, the way Dashiell barely looked at her, Vivian's obvious resentment toward her own daughter. They'd kept her around as long as she was useful, and when their debts caught up with them, they'd found a way to turn her into cash. There's something else, Detective Park continued. We found evidence that this isn't their first time. There are records of at least 2 other children who were placed with family members over the past 3 years. Both of those children have since disappeared from the system. Disappeared? Sold to private adoption networks that don't ask questions. The kind of people who pay premium prices for children with no official records or family looking for them. I thought about Scarlett mentioning their old house with the blue kitchen, how they'd moved suddenly and never gone back. How many other children had they done this to? The only reason Scarlett is safe, Detective Park said, is because you actually cared about her welfare instead of just processing the paperwork. If you'd been in on the scheme, she'd be gone by now. What happens now? Now we build a case. And you need to be very careful. If Vivian and Dashiell realize their plan didn't work, they might try to take Scarlett back. Not because they want her, but because she represents money they haven't collected yet. That evening, I sat on Scarlett's bed as she got ready for sleep, looking at her in a completely different light. This wasn't just a little girl who'd been abandoned by neglectful parents. She was a victim of an elaborate criminal scheme, a child who'd been kept alive and healthy specifically to be sold to the highest bidder. Aunt Emmy, she said as I tucked her in, you look scared. Are you okay? I smoothed her hair back from her face, this brave little girl who'd survived so much already. I'm just thinking about how much I love you. She smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. I love you too. Will you stay until I fall asleep? Always, I promised. As I sat there watching her breathe peacefully, I made a silent vow. Whatever legal battles lay ahead, whatever dangers might be coming, I would protect this child. She'd been treated like a commodity her entire life, but with me, she was family. Real family. And I was going to make sure no one ever hurt her again. 2 months after discovering the forged adoption papers, Detective Park's investigation had expanded into a federal case. The trafficking network was bigger than anyone had imagined, with connections spanning 3 states. But while the criminal case built momentum, my personal battle for Scarlett was just beginning. The family court hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. Sarah Manning had warned me it wouldn't be easy. Even with all the evidence of abandonment and fraud, the legal system moved slowly when it came to terminating parental rights. Remember, Sarah said as we walked up the courthouse steps, they're going to try to make this about your lifestyle, your unmarried status, your work schedule. Don't let them rattle you. Scarlett was staying with Mrs. Goldstein during the hearing. I'd explained to her that some grown-ups needed to have important conversations about her future, but I'd promised her that no matter what happened, she was safe. Inside the courtroom, I felt my stomach drop. Vivian sat at the defendant's table next to a sharp-looking lawyer in an expensive suit. She'd clearly been somewhere tropical. Her skin was tanned, her hair highlighted. She looked nothing like a woman who'd been struggling to save her marriage in intensive therapy. When our eyes met across the room, she had the audacity to smile and wave like we were meeting for coffee. Judge Patricia Clearwater called the session to order. She was a stern woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back severely and reading glasses that made her look like she could see straight through lies. This is a petition for emergency guardianship filed by Ms. Amelia Hartwell regarding the minor child Scarlet May Cross, Judge Clearwater announced. The basis for this petition is alleged child abandonment and fraud. Ms. Cross, you're appearing via video conference from Mexico. Is that correct? A large screen flickered to life, showing Vivian sitting in what looked like a resort lobby, with Dashiell visible in the background. So they weren't even trying to hide where they'd been. Yes, Your Honor, Vivian said, her voice coming through clearly. I want to state for the record that my daughter was not abandoned. She was placed in temporary care with my sister, while my husband and I attended to urgent business matters. Urgent business matters that have lasted over 3 months. Judge Clearwater's tone was skeptical. Vivian's lawyer, a man named Richard Stone, stood up. Your Honor, my client has been dealing with complex financial restructuring that required extended travel. Ms. Hartwell was fully informed and consented to care for the child during this period. That's not true, I whispered to Sarah, but she placed a calming hand on my arm. Sarah stood to present our case. She methodically laid out the evidence, the overpacked suitcase, the cleared-out house, the forged documents, the identity theft. She called Mrs. Goldstein as a witness, who testified about seeing the moving van weeks before Vivian had claimed to leave for therapy. Then came the hardest part. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Scarlett's therapist, took the stand to discuss my niece's psychological state. The child shows classic signs of complex trauma, Dr. Walsh explained. Hypervigilance, people-pleasing behaviors, fear of abandonment. She's made remarkable progress in the past 3 months, but she still experiences anxiety attacks when discussing her biological parents. In your professional opinion, Sarah asked, what would be the psychological impact on Scarlett if she were returned to her parents' custody? It would be devastating. She's finally beginning to develop secure attachment patterns with Ms. Hartwell. Removing her from that stability would likely cause significant regression and could result in long-term psychological damage. But when Stone cross-examined Dr. Walsh, he painted a different picture. Doctor, isn't it true that Ms. Hartwell has no experience raising children? That she works long hours at a demanding job? That she's never been married and has no stable male figure to provide for this child? Objection, Sarah said. Relevance. I'll allow it, Judge Clearwater said. Dr. Walsh straightened in her chair. Mr. Stone, the quality of care isn't determined by marital status or gender. Ms. Hartwell has provided Scarlett with consistency, emotional support, and unconditional love. Those are the foundations of healthy child development. When Vivian testified via video, she painted herself as a victim of circumstances beyond her control. Your Honor, Dashiell's business faced unexpected challenges that required us to liquidate assets and relocate temporarily. I always intended to return for Scarlett. My sister Emmy has always said she wanted children but couldn't have them naturally. I thought this arrangement would benefit everyone. Ms. Cross, Judge Clearwater interrupted. Are you aware that credit cards were opened in your daughter's name and used to accumulate thousands of dollars in debt? Vivian's face flickered with surprise. Clearly, she hadn't expected that information to come out. Your Honor, that must be some kind of mistake. I would never dash. Bank records show the cards were activated from your home address using your social security number as a cosigner, the judge continued. This appears to be identity theft of a minor child. Stone jumped in quickly. Your Honor, my client is not on trial for financial crimes here. This is a custody matter, and whatever mistakes may have been made financially don't negate a mother's right to her child. The hearing continued for hours. Stone attacked my character, my living situation, my ability to provide for a child long-term. He brought up my demanding job, my small apartment, my lack of experience with children. But Sarah was ready for every attack. She called my boss, who testified about my dedication and work ethic. She brought in my pediatrician, who spoke about Scarlett's improved health and development. Most powerfully, she played a recording Dr. Walsh had made during one of Scarlett's therapy sessions. "I don't want to go back to the screaming house." Scarlett's small voice filled the courtroom. "Aunt Emmy doesn't scream at me. She reads me stories and makes me feel safe. When I have bad dreams, she sits with me until they go away." I saw several people in the courtroom wipe their eyes, including Judge Clearwater. But the most shocking moment came when Detective Park took the stand to discuss the ongoing criminal investigation. "Your Honor, Ms. Cross and Mr. Cross are currently under federal investigation for human trafficking. We have evidence suggesting this is not the first time they've placed a child with a family member and then attempted to profit from that placement." Stone objected vigorously, but the judge allowed Detective Park to continue. "We've identified at least 2 other instances where children were placed in similar circumstances. Both of those children subsequently disappeared from official records entirely." From the video screen, I could see Vivian whispering urgently to Dashiell, who had moved closer to the camera. "Your Honor," Stone said, "my client has not been charged with any crime. These are merely allegations and speculation." "Mr. Stone," Judge Clearwater said dryly, "your client is testifying from Mexico while under federal investigation. That alone speaks to her commitment to resolving this custody matter." After 6 hours of testimony, Judge Clearwater called for a recess to review the evidence. Sarah and I sat in the hallway, both emotionally drained. How do you think it went?" I asked. "Better than I expected, honestly. The criminal investigation helps our case significantly. But custody law is complex, and biological parents have strong legal rights even when they're terrible people." When court reconvened, Judge Clearwater delivered her ruling. "This is an extraordinary case involving alleged child abandonment, identity theft, and federal criminal activity. While I cannot make findings on criminal matters in this civil proceeding, I can evaluate what is in the best interest of the minor child." My heart pounded as she continued. "The evidence clearly shows that Scarlett May Cross was left with Ms. Hartwell under false pretenses, that her parents cleared out their residence and left the country without providing adequate care arrangements, and that the child has thrived under Ms. Hartwell's care." She looked directly at the video screen where Vivian waited nervously. "Ms. Cross, your testimony that this was a temporary arrangement for business purposes is contradicted by substantial evidence. The packed suitcase, the cleared residence, the forged documents, and your extended absence in Mexico all suggest this abandonment was premeditated." Judge Clearwater turned to me. "Ms. Hartwell, while you've clearly provided excellent care for this child, I cannot immediately terminate parental rights based on a single hearing. However, I am granting you temporary emergency guardianship for a period of 6 months, during which time a full investigation will be conducted." Relief flooded through me, but the judge wasn't finished. "Ms. Cross, you have 6 months to return to the United States and demonstrate your fitness as a parent. If you fail to do so, or if the criminal investigation results in charges being filed, I will strongly consider terminating your parental rights permanently." The gavel came down, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. Stone was arguing with the judge about appeal options while Vivian's voice came shrilly through the video feed, demanding to know how this could be legal. But all I could think about was Scarlett, waiting at Mrs. Goldstein's house, probably wondering if today was the day her whole world would change again. 3 weeks after the custody hearing, Detective Park called with news that changed everything. "We found them," she said without preamble. "Vivian and Dashiell. They're in federal custody." I was at work, trying to focus on a marketing campaign while my mind constantly wandered to legal proceedings and Scarlett's well-being. "What happened?" "They tried to cross into Guatemala with 2 other children, siblings, ages 3 and 7. Kids they'd picked up from another family placement in Arizona. Border Patrol flagged their documents, and when they ran the names, our federal warrant popped up." My blood ran cold. "Are the children okay?" "They're safe. Traumatized, but safe. And their testimony is helping us map out the full scope of this operation." Detective Park paused. Amelia, this network was bigger than we thought. We're talking about dozens of children over the past 5 years. The plan was more sophisticated than simple trafficking, Detective Park continued. They would place children with caring family members like you, let the children be well cared for and develop attachments, then use forged legal documents to reclaim them months later. To private adoption buyers, it looked completely legitimate, healthy, well-adjusted children with clean paperwork and a documented care history. You were supposed to be the unwitting middleman who made Scarlet marketable. That evening, I sat Scarlet down for one of the hardest conversations of my life. She was 8 years old now, old enough to understand more but still young enough that the truth could devastate her. Sweetheart, I need to tell you something important about your mom and dad. She looked up from her homework with those serious blue eyes that had become so much brighter in the past year. Are they coming back?
No, honey.
They're not coming back. They're in trouble with the police for doing bad things to children. She considered this with the matter-of-fact acceptance that always amazed me. Did they do bad things to me too? Yes, sweetheart. But you're safe now, and they can't hurt you anymore. She nodded slowly. Does this mean you get to keep me forever now? It means we're going to ask the judge to make it official. Would you like that? For the first time since I'd known her, Scarlett's face lit up with pure, uncomplicated joy.
Yes.
Can I call you Mom? The question hit me like a physical blow, not because I didn't want it, but because I wanted it so much. If that's what you want, then yes. I'd love that. She threw her arms around my neck and held on tight. I love you, Mom. 2 months later, Sarah Manning called with the news I'd been hoping for. The prosecutor's office is offering Vivian a plea deal. She's going to testify against the trafficking network in exchange for a reduced sentence. Part of that deal includes her voluntarily terminating her parental rights. What does that mean for us? It means we can fast-track your adoption petition. If all goes well, Scarlett could legally be your daughter within 6 weeks. But there was one more surprise waiting. A week before the final adoption hearing, Detective Park appeared at my door with a nervous-looking man in his 40s. Amelia, this is Jonathan Sterling. He's Scarlett's biological father. My protective instincts kicked in immediately. What does he want? Jonathan Sterling looked uncomfortable but determined. Ms. Hartwell, I had no idea Scarlett existed until the FBI contacted me for DNA testing. Vivian never told me she was pregnant when our relationship ended. And now you want her back? I kept my voice calm, but inside I was panicking. No, he said quickly. No, I don't. I'm married, I have 3 other children, and frankly, my wife would leave me if this came out. But I wanted to meet her, to know she was okay, and to make sure she had everything she needed. Detective Park stepped in. Mr. Sterling has agreed to sign away his parental rights as well. He's also setting up a college fund for Scarlett. I studied this man who looked nothing like my daughter, but who shared her DNA. Why? Because she deserves better than being abandoned and forgotten. I can't be her father. That ship sailed 8 years ago, and honestly, from what I've seen, you're doing a much better job than I ever could. But I can make sure she has financial security for her future. That afternoon, I introduced Scarlett to her biological father. She was curious, but not particularly impressed. To her, family was about love and consistency, not genetics. Are you sad you can't be my daddy? She asked him with typical 8-year-old directness. Jonathan smiled sadly. A little. But I'm very happy you have such a wonderful mom who loves you so much. She's the best mom in the whole world, Scarlett said matter-of-factly. She reads me stories and makes dinosaur nuggets, and she never screams. The adoption finalization hearing was nothing like the custody battle 8 months earlier. This time, Scarlett sat beside me in the courtroom, wearing a new blue dress and practically vibrating with excitement. Judge Clearwater smiled as she reviewed the paperwork, something I'd never seen her do during our previous appearances. Ms. Hartwell, you've been caring for Scarlett for over a year now. How has this experience been for both of you? I looked down at my daughter, who was trying very hard to sit still like the grown-up she insisted she was becoming. Your Honor, Scarlett has been the greatest gift I never knew I wanted. She's taught me about unconditional love, about resilience, about finding joy in small moments. I can't imagine my life without her. And Scarlet, Judge Clearwater said, how do you feel about Miss Hartwell adopting you? Scarlet stood up, even though Sarah had told her she could stay seated. I feel very happy, Your Honor. Mom, she takes very good care of me. She helps me with my homework and takes me to the park, and when I have bad dreams, she sits with me until I feel better. I want her to be my real mom forever. Well then, Judge Clearwater said, let's make it official. By the power vested in me by the state, I hereby grant the petition for adoption. Scarlet May Cross is now legally Scarlet May Hartwell. The gavel came down, and suddenly everyone was crying and hugging. Mrs. Goldstein had come to witness the ceremony, along with Dr. Walsh and even Detective Park. It felt like gaining not just a daughter, but an entire extended family. That evening, we celebrated with pizza and ice cream, Scarlet's choice. As we sat in our living room, surrounded by the life we'd built together, I marveled at how much had changed since that panicked phone call over a year ago. Mom, Scarlet said, curled up against my side as we watched her favorite movie. Are you happy I'm your daughter? Sweetheart, you've made me happier than I ever thought possible. Good, she said sleepily. Because I never want to live anywhere else ever again. 6 months later, I got a call from Sarah Manning about something I never expected. Vivian wanted to see me. She was being held at a federal facility about 2 hours away, serving a 6-year sentence for her role in the trafficking network. I almost said no, but something made me agree to visit. The woman who sat across from me in the visiting room bore little resemblance to the glamorous sister I'd known. Prison had aged her, made her look hollow and tired. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not here for you, I said bluntly. I'm here because I wanted to look you in the eye and ask you why. Why did you hurt your own daughter like that? Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Because I was never supposed to be a mother. When I got pregnant with Scarlet, I was young and stupid and thought a baby would fix my relationship with Jonathan. When he left anyway, I resented her for existing. She was an innocent child. I know that now. Prison gives you a lot of time to think. Vivian looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Is she happy? She's thriving. She's smart and funny and kind, despite everything you put her through. Good. That's good. Vivian wiped her eyes. Emmy, I need you to know, giving her to you wasn't part of the trafficking plan. When everything started falling apart, when Dashiell said we needed to disappear, I could have taken her with us or sold her to strangers. But I knew you'd love her. I knew you'd give her the life I never could. I stared at my sister, trying to process this revelation. So, you did abandon her to save her? I abandoned her because I'm selfish and terrible with children. But I left her with you because somewhere in my broken mind, I knew you'd be the mother she deserved. I left that prison feeling oddly lighter. Vivian's actions were still unforgivable, but knowing that some small part of her decision had been motivated by love for Scarlet helped me make peace with the past. 2 years after the adoption was finalized, Detective Park called with the final update on the trafficking case. The network has been completely dismantled, she said. 17 children have been reunited with family members or placed in loving homes. 4 adoption agencies have been shut down, and 12 people are serving prison sentences. What about the other children who were never found? We're still looking. But, Amelia, what you did, fighting for Scarlet, refusing to just process the paperwork, you saved not just her life, but the lives of all those other children too. If you hadn't raised the alarm, this network would still be operating. That night, as I tucked Scarlet into bed, I thought about all the children who hadn't been as lucky as she was. Children who'd been sold to strangers, who disappeared into a system that failed to protect them. Mom, Scarlet said, interrupting my thoughts, Mrs. Patterson at school said there's a little girl in foster care who needs a family. Can we help her? I looked at my daughter, this amazing, empathetic child who'd survived so much trauma but still wanted to help others, and felt my heart swell with pride. We'll see, sweetheart. First, let me talk to some people about what we can do. 6 months later, we welcomed Maya into our family as a foster daughter. She was shy and scared, much like Scarlet had been 4 years earlier. But watching Scarlet take her under her wing, showing her that love could be safe and permanent, I knew we were exactly where we were supposed to be. The phone call that had started this journey had been meant to destroy a little girl's life. Instead, it had created a family built on love, resilience, and the unshakable belief that every child deserves to be cherished. As I watched my 2 daughters playing together in our living room, I realized that sometimes the worst betrayals really do lead to the greatest blessings. Scarlet had been unwanted by her biological parents, but she'd found her way to exactly where she belonged, with someone who wanted her more than anything in the world. And now we were paying that gift forward, one child at a time. Sometimes the greatest families are forged not by blood, but by the fierce determination to protect the innocent. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of courage, justice, and the unbreakable bonds that define true family.